Before we start this episode, we would like to thank our sponsors. The first one is Progress Telerik. They have amazing Blazor UI controls with over 95 components. So if you need something, they probably have it. Check them out at bit.ly/BlazorUI.
And our next sponsor is If Insurance. And they want to decrease injuries in society and need your help crunching historical data with .NET technology to predict the future. Their tech community is over 900 people and they are growing like never before. And you can check them out at bit.ly/ifdev.
But now, let's continue with the show.
Welcome back to Coding After Work podcast. And I'm very excited to present today's guest. We have Maria Naggaga. Welcome.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to this so much. But who are you and what do you do?
Oh, that's such a big question. So my name is Maria Naggaga. I'm a lead program manager at Microsoft. Now we're called product managers, actually. I have been at Microsoft for 10 years in October. I can't believe that happened. Right out of college, I joined Microsoft. What I do at Microsoft is, as a product manager, I own a majority of ASP.NET with the exception of Blazor. And also I am the co-creator of Dotnet Interactive and Try.net. So if you're not familiar with Dotnet Interactive, it's like an embeddable engine that you can use for multiple things. One of them is that we have this experience in Jupyter notebooks, which people usually associate with Python, where they can write .NET code. So you can write C#, F#. We don't have VB support. Sorry, I don't know if we're ever going to bring it. But then also support multiple other languages like JavaScript, and we're soon going to bring Python. But what's unique about our experience is that you can declare a variable in one language. So for example, in C#, and then you can pass that variable to JavaScript. So we have this concept of variable sharing languages. So that's like a big thing for us. And then Try.net was the first thing I ever made at Microsoft, the first thing I ever pitched. And people said, yeah, let's go build this. So if you go to docs.microsoft.com and you are able to write C# code in the browser, that's me.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, I would say.
Thank you.
Jupyter Notebooks is one of those things that been on my to-do list for quite some time. I gotta try it out, never really have the time. What are they used for?
So, number of things. Originally, Jupyter Notebooks were developed in the Python ecosystem as a way to create a living document, which is a concept of you had some code and then you could actually explain what that code did. And later went on to be involved to use a lot in machine learning and AI. So a lot of people who are doing massive data processing or data scientists tend to use Jupyter Notebooks for that. But there is an emerging trend right now happening with developers where developers are like, hey, I have this easy REPL experience, right? That creates this reusable content for people. So people are using it for troubleshoot guides where customers like customer support systems, or technical support in Azure specifically, is using Jupyter Notebooks to actually reproduce customers' problems on live sites. And that's huge. You also seeing people use it for things like being able to automate their deployments for their major services. I think Netflix uses Jupyter Notebooks, specifically a flavor of notebooks called Papermill, to actually help with all their automation. So the use case for Jupyter Notebooks is massive, right? It's so flexible. It's so easy to on-ramp on, and it just allows you to easily share a state of code or documentation without someone having to reproduce it on their machine.
A really advanced Wikipedia sort of thing. Can you use it for documentation as well?
Yeah. You can use it for documentation as well. Actually, when I was in school, my final year at university, the professor started using Jupyter Notebook specifically for the CS 101 class as a way to on-ramp to assignments. So people were using it for documentation all the time. I'd heard about people using it to write books and then actually export those books into different formats. So yes, documentation is an incredibly strong use case for this.
That sounds good. Jimmy is actually writing his second book now. And for some of the things, I know he wrote a bit of a program just because it's so much repetitive stuff. Maybe you
Hmm.
should look into this.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, C sharp and all that. So
Yeah.
you get that part for free.
Oh, and use .NET Interactive and can also works in VS Code. That's one of the benefits of our system as well. So when you're using Jupyter today, you have to have Python installed on your machine and you have to have Anaconda. The process can be a little bit ceremonial. But if you are a .NET developer, you might necessarily not want to have to install Python
Yeah.
in order to use this incredibly rich ecosystem. So we have a notebook extension in VS Code, .NET Interactive. Just look for it, install it, and you're good to go. There are a bunch of blog posts out there written by me. I haven't written one in about a year, which is terrible. But I have someone on my team right now who is focused 100% on notebooks. So I'm really hoping that we'll have more rich documentation. So, Jimmy, if you need any help, let me know. And
Thank
I
you.
will be your personal tutor.
Oh, oh, you need to take her up on that.
Yeah.
And I'm saying it and it's recorded and I can't take it back.
And it's our new ring signal, ringtone on the phone now. Have you seen someone use .NET Interactive in a surprising or very creative way?
The most creative way I've seen .NET Interactive being used was when one of the things I also made was minimal APIs with David Fowler. And when we were building up minimal APIs, one of the engineers who was working on it, Stefan Holter, built a Jupyter notebook, notebook using .NET Interactive in VS Code to test and prototype the API. Huh. So he prototyped a lot of minimal APIs in .NET Interactive notebooks. And because notebooks gives you this really rich output display, like it's just like a bunch of log files, you actually can put it in table format or create visualizations with graphs. That for me was like an eye-opening experience where it's like, why didn't you just pull up Postman and say, Postman is great and I love it, but I just needed something where I could customize it myself. So I have to say that was the most surprising way I saw someone use notebooks. Another surprising way I saw someone use notebooks, Diego Colombo, who also works on .NET Interactive with me, used the .NET Interactive notebooks to program a PyTop. So what a PyTop is, it's a Raspberry Pi, but in a hard case. And it's really made for education. So what he was doing was he was using the notebook as an editor to the PyTop and would make it like run around in circles or identify Pokemon cards. It was actually pretty fun to see how he transformed it to be used in the classroom and as a lightweight editor, which had like text and then a small code cell where a student could write code. It was incredibly rich. So I think those are the two most surprising ways I've seen someone use notebooks.
That's unexpected and cool at the same time.
It was cool, right? It was cool. But if you look at the notebook format, it just lends it to this flexibility of use cases. Because what's interesting about the whole concept of notebooks is that the cells, like notebooks are split into different cells, and these cells can either work together or independent from each other. So it would be the same as trying to open up, rather than having to open up 7 or 8 different console apps, you could just open up a notebook and have 7 or 8 different cells.
Huh. I had no idea, to be honest. Like Jimmy said, it sounds Jupyter Notebook. It's basically the only thing we've heard of so far. And it sounds cool, but we've never really grasped the whole thing because we didn't sit down and take the time to look it over. But now when it's in our own backyard, and Visual Studio Code is my favorite. And I think Jimmy prefers Visual Studio, but I really like Visual Studio Code. We are friends. I'm not as friendly with Visual Studio.
It's amazing. So it's so lightweight, it's cross-platform, and it just provides you this rich editing experience outside of a Windows environment.
Yeah.
But I have to also add, nothing can beat the productivity of Visual Studio when you're building like large-scale applications. there's nothing to it. So Jimmy, don't feel bad. I'm with you. Like I do all my back-end development in Visual Studio, and then I do all my front end in VS Code. So I'm a happy customer for both.
See, we can use both.
Side by side.
So last year, I know that .NET Interactive team collaborated with the Azure Data Studio team to bring SQL integration into .NET Interactive notebooks. How does that work?
The way we built the SQL integration, and I won't go as technically deep because I wasn't as involved at that time, but the way you bring SQL integration, it is through a NuGet package. So .NET Interactive has this whole concept of extensions. So any enhancements that you need would come in through a package. So SQL was one of those specific packages. So when you have the SQL package and you have it installed on your machine, what you'll also have, unfortunately at the moment that you'll have a SQL Server Management Studio as well, and we'll provide a connector between the notebook and the database that you have on your specific machine. Now, we are exploring opportunities as well where we can actually connect to a SQL Server in the cloud. So for example, like a database in the cloud. Now, the thing that we have to work on there is our authentication story. And that's something that we haven't quite nailed down yet, is how do we properly configure both within a notebook. And as you all know, authentication in ASP.NET is torture. Let me find a better word. It's a lot, right? But authentication everywhere is a lot. So we're trying to figure out how we bring that into notebooks in a way that is lightweight. Is it through a package where you install an authentication package and then you select your authentication provider and we spin up an output and a text box where you put in your password? We're still trying to figure that out. But the way it works today is that we bring it through a package. So there's one for MySQL. There is one, we're working on one for Cosmos DB. We're working on several different packages that people can use.
That opens a whole other world of things you can do. What can't you do in .NET Interactive?
World domination. Just kidding.
Well, you may or may not plan your world domination in it.
So the way we built .NET Interactive is that we built it to be flexible. So there's like the notebook scenario. You have to remember the notebook scenario is just really a formatter, right? Which is the ability to execute code in this format. Other ways that we've used .NET Interactive is in 2020, at the height of the pandemic, I worked with Scott Hanselman and the .NET Interactive team. We worked with him to build a demo for a build where someone was actually writing code in Teams and it was being executed by a Teams bot, a code bot, and the code bot engine was .NET Interactive. The execution was happening .NET Interactive. And that is the exact same .NET Interactive that powers the notebook.
That sounds so cool and so dangerous at the same time.
Yes. I was taken aback to MSN Messenger when that was a thing. And they opened up for making your own bots. And you can just install, you had a bunch of, I know Jimmy did a bot for that one as well. But can I, as a developer, use the same technology you used for Teams to build like Q&A bots and things like that?
Yeah, you can, because we use the bot framework that exists within Microsoft. So it's the exact same framework. The Teams thing was just, the code bot in Teams was just a demo and never became a real thing.
Yeah.
Because you always wonder when people are like doing random code executions.
Yeah.
Right?
Might not always be the best idea.
It might not always be the best idea. That's why, like, even with try.net, when we're running the code in the browser, remember, try.net, you don't have to log into anything. So there were massive security alarms when we proposed this. And that's why the first version of try.net was hosted in Azure Container Instances, where we actually spin up an Azure Container instance with it in it. And if every 5 minutes, that container was thrown away and replaced.
Yeah.
Very expensive thing. Would strongly not recommend it. Because I remember being on vacation and Scott Hanselman was my boss at the time, and he called and was like, hi, Maria, we just got a bill for Try.net and it's $50,000 for the week.
Oh,
And yeah, so you need to figure that out fast. So what do you do when you want to offer a free experience like that without having to block people with a file, like login, right? Like the ability to log in. And luckily at that time, Blazor had just become a thing.
yeah.
And Try.net was actually one of the first official customers of Blazor, and we use Blazor Watson till today to do the code execution. So it's happening in the browser, it's happening on your machine, that's your phone, but that's random code execution is also always very scary. If you all know Barry Dorns, whenever I mention stuff like this to him, he just looks at me and he's like, why are you doing this, Maria? Why? And I'm
Because
like,
I can.
Right. We haven't had any security like issues at all with Try.net or .NET Interactive. Interactive is local, but people can also put it in a container. A lot of people put it in something called Binder that spins up a container for you on Docker. And you can also use it in code spaces, but these are all very tried and tested. And we have had no security issues whatsoever. No one has tried to use us for what's that thing that people like to do now? Bitcoin mining? Yeah, no one has tried to use us for that. So we're secure. Like we are secure.
Yeah, that's good.
Would .NET Interactive be a good fit for a blog, for example?
Yeah, I believe that it would be. Right? Like one of the things I would love to do with .NET Interactive is the ability to publish it to an HTML with a runnable code snippet. But I would then make the runnable code snippet not editable in YAML. I wouldn't.
No.
Right? Because I wanted for anybody to be able to publish to their own. It still makes it interactive. It still makes it the ability for people to see what the code does without like putting any security concerns, both on the person who's using your blog as well as a person who's building the blog as well. So yeah, I'd love to do this with, I think we have a static generator, site generator in .NET. I forget what it's called. I think it's called Static by Dave Click. Are you too familiar with it?
No,
No.
not from the top of my mind.
Oh yeah. So he has this awesome static site generator. And we talked to him in the earlier days of Try.net of trying to work together to do something with .NET Interactive and Static in order to publish this interactive coding experience. But at that time, the tech wasn't where it is today.
I see so many possibilities. I told you I teach, and the learning management systems that is used in the world, does not have the best UX, to put it mildly. I'm fortunate to work with one of the best ones I've seen, but it still has a crappy UX. And we have files in Teams, we have files in that system, we have files in the clouds, we have so many different places for messages, for contacting the students, for the materials, for everything. So it's really not that easy to find the stuff you're looking for. To be able to use this as a base and also for the education, if we can run the code. Do you remember what was that page called? Like Frogger,
Yeah.
the CSS Frogger, stuff like that. You could use it in the notebooks. And that would be, oh my gosh, I have so many ideas now.
And you see why people go a little bit crazy with notebooks, because because of all the different MIME types and supports, you can actually format what the output will look like.
Yeah.
And it has to be a meaningful output to the person. So one of the things that we immediately explore, like if somebody is trying to put together a list or generate a dictionary, and then you print it and you just get like a line of items, we're just like, why don't we put it in a table? And that makes more sense to people. If people are looking at log files and you're trying to map out when something happened and you have a time series and timestamps, you can present it in a graph. And that's what makes notebooks, especially since you're able to manipulate the output, so rich.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can see what Spectra Console has done for making beautiful console applications. We've worked with Patrick to figure out how we can bring that kind of experience into .NET Interactive. And because you're presenting in a place like with a notebook, for example, you can you can pull in different formats. So if you have a CSV file, you can pull that in. If you have a JSON file, you can pull that in. So you have your students being able to pull in all this different stuff that they're learning.
Yeah.
And you can also make sure that you use things like, what's the thing called live share, right?
Hmm.
VS Live Share. That would work in a notebook if you're using it in VS Code. So the opportunity here is just endless, because you could even have students build their own formatters. Like we had interns come in, and when I'm writing code and I'm trying to learn, I would love it if if the output gave me feedback that
Hmm.
made sense to me. So this professor in Italy wrote this extension on top of .NET Interactive, which he's using in the classroom right now, where as you're writing your code, let's say I write console.writeLine, and I have a lowercase w instead of a capital W, it will give you a neutral smiley face, like a neutral face
Hmm.
to say, you're almost there, keep on going. And then as the student is writing out the code, they can see their facial expressions of this emoji change until it's like this happy, over the moon smiley face.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're pushing the student to like think about like the keystrokes and typing and being engaged in the code versus getting this syntax error, which are just like, okay, I better go on to Stack Overflow and figure out
Yeah.
what that means. So
Click.
that's a huge thing for education. I've just
Yeah.
been blown away.
You need to think about, why do I only get the neutral smiley face, and what is the difference between the neutral and the happy smiley? Why did it change? You need to think about that. If you go on Stack Overflow, you get the correct answer, so to speak, which means you may or may not remember that the next time. So it's just increasing the learnability to have things like this. It doesn't have to be the smiley face, but just put it together in a way that works for that student. That's fantastic.
And Jessica, this might interest you. Like we actually have a prototype of that project on our GitHub repo. So if you go to .NET Interactive
Ooh.
GitHub repo and you go and you look for the journey folder, that was the intern project, where they're just like, how can professors and teachers and students work together in order to generate meaningful outputs in
Yeah.
the education system? And they had the concept of a progress bar, right? So as you were writing your code, it would give you a progress bar and you're like, you're orange right now. Have you considered using this instead?
Hmm.
So it's rather than forcing people into the copy and paste developer
Yeah.
experience, into how do we create that muscle memory and that confidence that people build up by writing code and being
Yeah.
given feedback that makes sense to them.
That's awesome. What I do, I teach UX for developers, and what we do, they work in a couple of days. They work on smaller assignments, and then the last day they need to put that together to one coherent output, and to be able to pull stuff they already put in all the work, but instead of scrambling trying to find the pictures, trying to figure out if they are using PowerPoint or Word or just taking screenshots, being able to show that and just send me the notebook would be fantastic. Someone please do a learning management system based on .NET Interactive, because you will get rich, let me tell you, because the systems that we use are not the best. So
Yeah, do it. We support multiple languages, even though I know it's deceptive that we're saying the name is .NET Interactive,
yeah,
but we support JavaScript, HTML, C#, F#, PowerShell, and we're SQL, and we are bringing Python and R support soon as well.
that's awesome. Will it be updated to .NET 7 when the time comes?
Mhm. It will.
That's good.
It will. Yeah.
We like to hear that. So
We try to be early adopters on the .NET Interactive team. So yeah.
yeah, I love that. We are as well. Jimmy he took Blazor into production at his company day 8.
Okay, that's
That's 8 days. It's
Yeah, it's
an
old.
eternity of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it went well. It went well. Baby steps as when it comes to early adoption.
was this like the first version of Blazor? Like, oh wow,
Yeah.
Jimmy, you were invested.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We love Blazor. It actually saves us so much time,
Yeah.
and we can do a lot more, especially interactive web applications that we came from a MVC or Razor Pages world.
Yeah.
So moving to Blazor just opens so many doors. I can't even count them.
Yeah, and I like when you can move stuff over a little by little and you don't have to do a whole expensive rewrite of a whole system. So that's always good. So I told my friend that we were recording this podcast with you, and immediately she said, I would love to deep dive into it. I've just dabbled a little bit, but I can see it being useful in DevOps works. And we're talking about .NET Interactive. What do you think
Okay.
of that? We're using .NET Interactive for DevOps work.
Okay. Yes. So your friends, people are using .NET Interactive for DevOps work, specifically around automation. So what people are doing, I'm not personally doing it, but what I have seen customers use it for is for configuring their DevOps pipelines.
Yeah.
So I've seen people use that for using .NET Interactive for like DevOps configuration is something actually people use Azure Data Studio using .NET Interactive for. That's one of their biggest customer workloads is people configuring things like DevOps pipelines.
I can see that because sometimes it feels like there's a threshold for doing that, and you need to log in and you need to find where it is, which is usually the most problem we have with it.
Yep.
Finding where all the settings and stuff like that is. That's good. I will let her know that. She will probably be very happy about that.
Yeah, Christos, he does a lot of blog posts and video content on how he uses .NET Interactive to configure authentication and identity.
Oh, really?
Oh.
I saw one of his demos maybe this time last year when he was like, I think this could be something that we use it for. And I would strongly encourage people to go and watch his videos because he, like, anything I say here will not do it justice. So I'm seeing people do that. Another one, which is around the DevOpsy workload, is troubleshoot guides. So we're finding that people are using notebooks to like troubleshoot life sites. I briefly mentioned it at the beginning. And we did a demo of this at MVP Summit. I think both of you are MVPs, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So at the MVP Summit, we decided to do a play instead of doing a presentation.
Because why not?
Why not? And in this play, what we did was a customer went onto this website and realized that all the comments for certain items were blank. There was not a single comment on any items. So they leave a very vague message, like when you say contact us, this doesn't work on this page. Then what happens, it goes to the people in IT. They look at the live site and like the DevOps pipelines look green and this looks green and everything looks great. So they're like, let's contact the PM who owns this stuff. And I played the role as a PM, the product manager. I was like, yeah, this looks good. I don't know what's happening. I'm going to pass this over to the engineers. And what you're noticing is that there's passing off of data where one, the customer information of this doesn't work. You get like a bunch of log files from IT just showing you like, these are the logs and the logs look great. And then you send it to engineering. And then with engineering, because they have the customer information, they have access to the code, they have access to app insights, they have access to the log files. They put it all into different cells and then they run these cells and then they're able to notice that, oh, at this time, there was a bad actor here and someone was injecting bad JavaScript and that's why it isn't working and we're able to fix it. So typically, this was actually based on a real story that the Azure Data Studio told us where their customer struggled for three weeks trying to figure this out. And when they introduced the whole concept of the troubleshoot guide using notebooks, it took them 20 minutes
Ouch. That is a huge difference.
Yeah.
because you brought all the data together and you're able to
Yeah.
bring it up in this space
Yeah.
that like we're able to either work with code separately or bring them together. So that was like a huge thing. And we've been promising to do a more public recording of this, but at the MVP summit, people lost their minds.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Imagine how much money and troubleshooting hours you save when you have to do it for 20 minutes versus you need to set it up, of course, but
Yeah.
versus 2-3 weeks. That's very helpful.
Oh yeah. Setting up a notebook takes minutes. It takes nothing to set up a notebook. And then because you have this notebook, it's an archive.
Hmm.
And that means that any single time that IT person has that incident report, they can actually run this notebook again
Yeah.
and be able to you'd run a notebook that says, okay, grab me the customer comment, grab me the log files, grab me the telemetry and outage report. Like you just have all this information and then they're able to run it because you've configured it together.
That's amazing because one of the things we see, especially when you have more than one system integrated behind the scenes to your page or whatever service you're providing, there's so many things that could go wrong. You're not even sure if it's that part of the system, or if it's the API that's broken, or if it's the person who put in the wrong data, or where should we start looking? If we can just get that in one place, that's amazing. And we can
And you can
do
see
that
where
with, yeah. I am
people
getting,
would like to use it for DevOps.
yeah. I'm becoming a fan of that interactive. Definitely.
I'm a fan too.
Would you look at that?
We have something in common.
That's awesome. You also mentioned that you work on minimal APIs. So what is that?
Okay. So minimal APIs is a low ceremony way to build APIs in .NET. Now, originally, you two are both .NET developers. When someone wants to build a API that calls a single endpoint, you usually had to have it in an MVC pattern, and you had 5-6 files just to do this one thing.
Mhm.
So minimal APIs is thinking about if you're building a lightweight API or microservices, you should be able to do it in a single file.
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds reasonable. And because of like enhancements and things like top level statements, thank you, Mads, for listening and making top level statements with me. Mads is great. I told him like, Mads, this will change the world. We're able to actually do things like in a single way, you can actually declare an HTTP. And that was all drawn from me having inspiration from different platforms that did it. So that's minimal APIs in a nutshell. Do you want me to go into a little bit of the history of why we built minimal APIs?
Yes, please.
Okay. So minimal APIs literally started with a tweet from the Dapper team. So the Dapper team did a bunch of samples where they built something in .NET, Go, and Node. And Go was one file, Node was one file, and we were like 50 files
Ouch.
to do the same thing. Everyone was like, this makes C# look bad. This makes C# look bad. This makes
Yeah.
.NET look bad. This makes .NET look complicated. Why would anybody pick .NET to build a microservices? And the worst part is that it was being told by our community. Like sometimes you hear it from other people, but when it comes from the .NET community talking about how they want you to do justice to their language, we had to change. So I am known in the dev world of taking the complicated and simplifying that. So when David Fowler saw this, he reached out to me and said, what are your thoughts on this? And I was like, I have been telling you all this for 5 years. We cannot win this space if we're that complicated. And the web is the entryway to everything. It's like, it's one of the most enriching developers. It's hard, but it's also one of the most enriching developer experiences because you build something and you're able to put it out there in the world. So him and I sat down and we looked at other platforms. Like we looked at Go, we looked at Fast API, and we're just like, what makes these experiences so appealing? And I was like, it's because it's easy to get started. There is no ceremony, very no ceremony to set these things up. So we ran an experiment on a product called Feather. It was him and I with Charles, who's our UX researcher. We went rogue and said, we're going to run an experiment where I say, David, I need you to build a sample where someone is able to, in a single file, build a simple endpoint. And we're going to do a tutorial with non.NET developers and see how they react to it. And the feeling was overwhelming. JavaScript developers were just like, are you sure this isn't JavaScript? And then like Java developers are like, this is .NET. And a Python developer was like, I can't believe this is .NET. I thought .NET was supposed to be hard. And there was another developer who said, I can't believe I'm going to pollute my machine with .NET. But after he did it, he was just like, I was harsh on .NET. So it did change the way people were thinking about building their application. And this wasn't only just newbies. We also brought a lot of people with like 10, 20 years of industry experience who use the minimal API experience and say, okay, this is a way you build large scale, like lightweight microservices. And the benefit that we have in .NET in comparison to a lot of other frameworks, that I'm sure there are other frameworks that scale with you, is that we do enterprise very well. So as your application grows in complexity and grows in usage, we'll be able to scale with you. Like we have web APIs and MVC that prove that people can run their multi-billion-dollar enterprises on our product. That's the story of Minimal. So Minimal was originally me and David Fowler who started it out. But now, as I told you, I have a team. So I haven't touched Minimal for the past 6 months, but I have a team, Josh, and they work on it with Damian Edwards, who's a primary architect for Minimal APIs now. So it's in good hands. Just look my hands every day anymore.
So I read somewhere that you can build an API with less than 3 lines of code using minimal APIs. Is that true?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can.
That's different from 5 different files, and that's amazing. Good work.
They should be a to-do sample that I put together. I built this minimal API rogue site. It was an experiment on rethinking the way we built applications, but I think I did an entire to-do application with Swagger, with all the bells and whistles that you needed, with a database, with everything. And I think the file is maybe about 36 or so lines of code, maybe a little bit more. And that's huge. So to-do apps are usually one of the first CRUD apps that people ever build in their lives.
Yeah.
So being able to provide a complete to-do app experience in that little amount of code is pretty good, right? It's not, I don't have authentication turned on or anything like that, but just a simple CRUD app with all the bells and whistles was a lot less.
One of the things I really love about minimal APIs is that you can have dependency injection right there. You don't have to do it in the class or in the control or anything like that.
But yes, that was a whole concept of like, when we were building minimal APIs at the beginning, my voice has always been, that doesn't feel natural to write. And whenever, that's how I always pushed the entire .NET organization as much as I can, is that as we are writing code, does it feel natural to write? One of the things that I always struggle with is that any single time I'm going to do anything with HT frameworks, I always have to Google it. And I do it all the time. And then authentication, don't even get me started. Like, I'm just like, where's the official documentation? Copy and paste. It's very much like that. So what I'm trying to drive across the stack is how do we have more naturally written code? And I think like languages like Python and JavaScript do that very well, where you write, the language always feels that you're speaking a language you're familiar with. And I want to get .NET and C# to that place.
When would you say that minimal APIs is not the solution? When should you go with the controller or anything like that?
Good question. I've been asked that question many a times, and I don't have the right answer for it. because it's not an either or situation, because I think
Yeah.
that's the way people think about it. You either use minimal or you use MVC. It's really appropriate to one of them, they work well together. That's a big thing. But I think if you have hundreds of APIs that you're building and managing, you probably want to put it in an MVC application for structure, because I can't imagine having that in a single file. So that's when I'd say definitely use a controller-based API, because controller-based APIs are really about structure and organization above everything else. But if I was building an add-on to my app, let's say, what's an example of a very good microservice? Let's say I wanted to introduce a new payment system, right? To my application. Maybe I'll try minimal APIs first. Maybe I wanted to add a new login experience. Maybe I'll try minimal APIs for that. So when you think about microservices, like micro apps should be micro, that is for it. When you're thinking about large scale applications and you're managing hundreds or thousands of APIs, you're going to need structure and you're going to want to use a controller based API.
Good answer.
That's a good answer.
Hope so. We'll see how the internet responds when they listen to this. But yeah, there are many people who just swear by minimal APIs. It works perfectly for what they need. But there are a lot of people, I can imagine if you're in the banking sector and you look at minimal APIs, you're just like, that does not do what I need it to do.
Funny you should say that, because
okay.
Jimmy is in the banking industry.
I got it wrong then.
If you really enjoy minimal APIs, like we do have some cases where we have minimal APIs, but in several files, but we call that from the startup or from program or whatever, so that we can define them somewhere else and get that structure, but still have the dependency injection and the really nice way of writing APIs.
So you're structuring your unstructured APIs.
Oh, kind of.
That's good.
Jimmy might be onto a new programming pattern here. Like I've been trying to figure out, like one of the things that one of the engineering directors has asked me to think about, and I put it on the shelf, is if it isn't MVC, what is it? Because we've always had this natural progression. You grow up into this application, but it might be a time, maybe it's a time in the world right now where we have a new programming pattern that might emerge from this minimalist code experience. And especially since we're offloading a lot of stuff into the cloud, and there might be opportunities where we might need structure, but not as heavy, not as detailed, because of the way we're programming is changing. Like I think if you went back and you showed someone who built the first computer and built the first programming language, and you just look at this, it'll be like, what does that do? So I think we're at this point of new patterns of programming are going to emerge. I don't want to declare that it's minimalism. Like people say that Maria is all about minimalism. It's true, I am. But I think, Jimmy, you're onto something that maybe it's more of like injecting stuff at startup and then coding it in differently. But we'll see how people begin to use it. If you have a blog post out there, Jimmy, that describes how you use this, I would love to read it.
I don't, but I could write one.
Yeah, you should.
Please, because I think it'd be really good for people to see how real world users who are working in these very .NET spaces like banking, where we have led the way, are using our new patterns.
Sure.
Is there something that you're really passionate about that is not computer related?
Yeah. One of the things I'm most passionate about is I like to draw a lot. So I think one of my favorite things to do is draw. And I'm not a great artist. I actually call myself a hack artist. Like it's very hacking drawing.
I've seen your artwork. It's amazing.
You are very kind, Jessica.
No, I would kill for your Wonder Woman in that amazing afro and have that on the wall.
Okay. I have to be invited to a conference in Sweden, and I need to bring one for you, Jessica. So I've promised it right here. But yeah.
Well, we happen to organize a couple of conferences here in Sweden, so we need to talk afterwards, I think.
I'm making so many promises on this podcast.
No, actually, I found your old Tumblr, I think it was,
Um,
with your, what do you call it? The Afro style.
Posted in there for a
I
while. Okay.
know, but I got stuck because it's so amazing. And I like superheroes. So, of course, Wonder Woman was the first one I really fell in love with. But you have like Sailor Moon and all these iconic people in this amazing afros. And I love it.
I'm yet to, there's one I did, and I need to just turn on the machine. I haven't turned it on for like a year or so. But there was one I was working on the Avengers with afros, and that was like,
That would be
Nice.
amazing.
that's nice. But then there are many artists who do the thing that I do as well. There's a guy called Hippo T. Actually, I have one of his pizzas here. Like I can show it to you, the people want to fight. But
But we can link to his page or something.
yeah, so if you look at his work,
Oh my God, that is so cute.
so his work is he takes characters like characters from Miyazaki's work, and this is Ponyo, and he gives them afros, and he does it in the style, and it's amazing. Yeah, he's Hippie Potter, and he's an amazing artist. He also does the Powerpuff Girls. Getting one of those is really hard, but if you are looking for art to connect, I would strongly
Oh
recommend
my
his artwork.
gosh, you
It's
had me at
stunning.
Powerpuff Girls. Yeah,
He's lovely. Like his work is amazing. So
I need to check that out.
actually, I think the pronouns are they them, but I need to
Oh,
check out
okay.
like really good artists.
Yeah, I need to check them out. Definitely.
So we have a couple of questions that we ask all our guests.
Oh,
What
scary.
was your first computer?
Oh yeah. So my first computer, it was when I was a kid. It was in 1995, and it was a Gateway 2000.
Gateway 2000.
Which one
Uh,
is
it was. I had to look it up once because I started talking about it, and people were like, "What is that?" Yeah, a Gateway 2000. Yeah, it was a vintage machine. If you look it up, it had like cow prints on the side. Not inside, but the box came with
Yeah.
cow prints.
Oh, that's so
And
cute.
yeah, the Gateway 6000. I had to look it up. It's called Gateway Inc. Previously, Gateway 2000. That was the original name of the company. So that was the first computer I ever had.
Cool. What was the first language you ever coded in?
SQL.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Yeah. And it was completely by accident. I had no idea what I was doing.
I think you're the first one to say sequel.
Yeah.
No idea. So I think Access used to allow you to do like minor SQL statements.
Mm.
And when I got this computer, like when my parents bought this computer, it was really just for the internet because my sisters had gone to university abroad. And I was like, I think I was like 9 at the time. And what happened is like we only had Office, like we only had Microsoft Office and the internet. So I'd play around in Office and do all the stuff. And then I opened Access one day and I was like, what is, and I created a database and then I pressed something and then it showed me this stuff, which like now I know is query language and it looked like English. So I was like, okay, so it says select this from this. And that was the first stuff I ever programmed. And I had no idea until much later in my life that I was actually writing code. No clue. And I wrote so many like programs and I had no idea what I was doing. It was just like a fun thing they used to do.
That's awesome. I remember doing a database in Access and I liked it because it was also visual. So you could
Mhm.
color it in and it looked
Yeah.
it looked horrible. And
Horrible.
I still have it, but I have never shown it to Jimmy because it's not accepted. It should not be in this world because I don't know how to set up a database the correct way. But I had a database with all the stars and planets and meteors and stuff.
So I believe the task was make a database, and Jessica, the overachiever, just created, you know what? Let's do the whole universe.
Yeah, most of the people did a car register where you could find out the color of the car, the license plate, and the make and model. But we took it a little bit further in our group and had the density of the planet, if it had gravity, all of that. Yeah, because why
See,
not?
Why not? Why do the
Yeah.
boring stuff?
Exactly. What am I ever going to do with a database of cars that I put in myself? If I put in 10 cars, I will remember them. I do not remember all the celestial bodies that are in that database. Maybe I should find that. I think it's on some sort of CD-ROM somewhere.
Yeah, that's keeping it old school. Like, I
Yeah,
guess you didn't say a floppy disk, but yeah.
yeah. We should do that on stream.
You should just fire it up and think, does this work?
Yeah.
And then you try to make it work. That could be
And
pretty
need I to be ashamed of it or not?
cool. Nah.
And how can we take this to this part of the century?
No, I think I still have the first HTML thing that I built, and it was using, remember Free?
Yes,
Mhm.
And it was like, there was a thing like
yes,
the time when the world thought,
yeah.
that the web thought that was the future.
Mhm.
That was the future. I
Yeah.
actually got paid to do a web page, and it had, I think it was like 11 or 12 iframes, and it's horrible. But back in the day, you could update one of the cells because you were using iframes. It was
It was the future.
amazing. Today, you can do that in whatever HTML you throw up on the web. Oh, those were the times. Okay, so we have one last question, and this might be the most important one.
Gosh.
Marvel or DC?
Marv.
Yes! I was afraid that Jimmy was going to get a point for his team because of the Wonder Woman. But yes, we are on the winning team.
But that being said, Marvel, amazing comments, amazing universe. DC, though, has the best cartoon series out there. So Young Justice is
Yes!
freaking brilliant. So
It is!
So when it comes to cartoon, like, shows, DC, like,
Yeah,
kicks out of the door, but like
yeah.
Marvel through and through. But like DC's cartoon, like Young Justice, is quality TV. It
It
should even be
is.
for kids. It's too good.
We may or may not watch that. Yes.
Not
It
making me
is
say it.
actually really good because it has the real storylines and real stories, not someone came and stole my cat. And
And it addresses things like grief, mental illness,
Yes.
struggling, imposter syndrome.
yeah,
Yeah, forgiveness. You're just like, wow, these are some serious topics. So whoever writes that show, like, hands down, like,
Yeah.
they're excellent writers. Yeah.
I have so many audio clips now, so I think it might be Team Jimmy after all.
you're going
Just
to
rearrange
cut this up.
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're going to cut
You'll
this
just
up.
rearrange it.
Yeah.
You'll just like, but no, I'm going to say it again. Marvel is still the best. Like, DC cartoons are excellent.
I'm gonna say it again. DC cartoons are excellent. Yes, got it. Yeah.
This is what I live with. Oh my gosh. If our listeners wants to find you, where can they go? Do you have Twitter or a blog?
Yeah, so I do not have a blog. You can reach me on the Twitters. So I'm Lady Naggaga. So it's Lady then Naggaga, Naggaga. And then if you want to try out anything that I built, Dotnet Interactive, we have our repo. We're like open source. Please try us out. We're looking for as much feedback as we want. And then also try out minimal APIs on anywhere, right? Like, basically get the .NET SDK and start building your minimal APIs. And Jimmy has promised to write that wonderful blog post as well.
I
So I'm
will.
doing. But yeah, that's how you can reach me.
Awesome. We make sure to link that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us. This was so much fun.
It was.
This was so much fun. Thank you so much, Jessica and Jimmy. I was like, good date, like a way to kick off the week.